Do you want a better business? Every business is made up of processes. And have you ever tried to improve one of those processes only to find that it feels like way too much to handle at one time? You get lost in the complexities of it. It feels like you're juggling. And at the end of the day, it feels like nothing is actually better off. In fact, you might have even broken the process that feels critical to your business. Uh-oh. What I'm going to share with you today is a tool called flowcharting that you may or may not be familiar with that is unbelievably helpful in looking at a business and the processes that make it up and improving them one by one. I'm going to share with you a very clear and straightforward first step in order to get started on creating a flowchart so that whether we're working together or you're doing this on your own, we can help you build a better business. My name's Leo Manzione. I'm a business coach. Let's jump in. If you've ever seen a flowchart or used one, it's a really helpful way to look at a process. And here's the thing, you've heard about this in other videos, but the brain can really only process so much information at one time. You go beyond that and essentially shuts off and stops being useful. So a flowchart visually depicts the actions and decisions and documents of a process so that you could look at it piece by piece and do a couple things that I'm going to share with you that you can do to improve the process. Now, I know that may feel daunting because it very well can be. It can be this huge thing that has to be built over many iterations honoring Gall's law. So I'm not going to recommend that you start with that. What I'm going to recommend that you start with is the ingredient to a good flowchart, or really any process for that matter, called a narrative. A narrative is you essentially telling the story of a process that you're familiar with. You can go from main step to main step, or in very granular detail of some component of a main step that really needs to be done particularly. So here's how I recommend you capture your first narrative. Grab a smartphone or recording device, press record, and tell the story of the process piece by piece. If you're not so much an audio person or you hate hearing your own voice on recording, just go ahead and grab a piece of paper and write down those primary steps. If you did record yourself, this is the next step of listening to it and writing down those primary steps. Now, the steps may be all you need. You may not need to put that visually into a flowchart, and in the short term, that saves you the trouble of needing to learn how to flowchart, which is totally okay for now, because that step-by-step process can become a checklist that you use in order to either hand off the process to somebody else or make these two critical improvements that are possible earlier on in this process. Now, before I talk about those, I just want to be clear that step-by-step process can be turned into a flowchart using either software like Visio or Lucidchart, or you could just Google how to create a flowchart and do it on paper step by step. This is an important thing long-term when your process becomes way more complicated than a checklist or remembering it can possibly handle. So I will say clearly long-term, I highly, highly recommend that you flowchart out your most critical and complex processes in order to allow people like me to step in and help. So as promised, here are the two things you can do to improve, even if it's just a step-by-step checklist that you pulled from either an audio recording or by thinking about the process step by step. One, ask yourself the question, is this the right sequence? There's a very real chance that you're doing things effectively out of order, and if you resequence it, then it's a lot easier to do. And two, this is actually often a byproduct of resequencing, but it's a different question. Looking at which step of the process is really holding the rest of it back. This is a concept called bottlenecking, which we'll talk about a lot more in other videos. But maybe there's a tool that, if added to a certain key step, could really allow the process to become a lot easier. Maybe there's a resource that it's lacking that really needs to be brought into the equation in order to make that a lot less starved for what it needs. Maybe it's a person, maybe it's somebody else doing it at the same time so you can do twice as much. There's a lot of different things you can improve the process, but if you're thinking about the whole thing all at once, it's going to be overwhelming and it's really difficult to narrow down where the improvements can be made. Thus the power of those lists, thus the power of flowcharts, thus the power of this process overall. So just to repeat one more time, what I recommend is taking the process narrative, the story of how it's done, and capturing it, either in an audio recording or just by writing it down step by step. Then as you look at those steps, one, obviously make sure that they're accurate, and then two, ask yourself these two questions. Should these be resequenced? Is there part of it that's holding the rest of it back? Circle it, make that fix, and you'll find yourself having a better process overall that you can eventually turn into a complex, powerful, consistent component of your business that allows you to really build and build and build. My name is Leo Manzione. I'm a business coach. If you need any help, check the description. We give away complimentary sessions, and I'm more than happy to sit down with you and even help you start mapping out one of these key processes to your business so that you can improve it and get the experts in there that'll help you take it to a whole new level. I'm glad you're here. Thanks for watching.